Greetings, Royals, and welcome back to Queen Tasha TV. In this video, I'm going to share the real story behind why I left the conventional life behind and embraced the freedom of RV life for the past 6 years. It seemed pretty sudden that I went from chasing the American dream where bigger is better to dreaming about building a tiny house and living minimally. And then I eventually ended up in the RV lifestyle, now in my third RV. Along the way, I've faced a lot of setbacks and I've questioned my choices because sometimes RV life was choosing me and I wasn't choosing it. But I have embraced the true path that this lifestyle allows me to live a truly free life. So whether you're curious about the RV lifestyle or you're seeking inspiration for your own journey, or maybe you just love a good story, stick around because I'm going to get into the highs and lows of RV life. The road has not been smooth, but it's been worth it. So roll up, grab a drink, get comfy, because this is going to be a long one. Let's get into it. Greetings and welcome to Queen Tasha TV. I'm Queen Tasha and I invite you to join me as I share my RV adventures, nomadic lifestyle tips, sustainable living practices, and vibrant Black Travel Tribe meetup highlights. A new edition will be diving into sharing my reignition, music, and dance journey, and my intuitive guidance to inspire and empower other queens. Together, let's live fearlessly free and reign supreme. Like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to the Empire. Before I get into RV life, I gotta go back to how it started. So I moved to Houston, Texas, and when I got there, I was doing Uber at the height of its like glory days when you could really be self-sufficient off of the money. And when I got to Houston, like, I got the biggest apartment that I've ever had by myself solo, and it was so nice. Like, I was definitely chasing the American dream of like having big and better. I had got a new car when I got there so that I can do Uber, and I had this very nice apartment, had several credit cards, and I nested in my apartment, so I got all a bunch of, you know, just different furniture and stuff like that off Facebook Marketplace, and you know, all of the different things at that time, Craigslist and stuff like that. And I definitely was like feeling myself. Like, I was like, yes, this is it, this is it. I was grinding, like self-sufficient. Like, it was the first time that I really was like working for myself and trying out the whole independent contractor and self-employed route in a full-time way. And so, you know, I was grinding just to have this apartment, just to be at this apartment that I was never at because I was out grinding like all the time. Like, I treated Uber like a full-time job, and I just wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy, and I just wasn't feeling like the whole lifestyle. I was just like, why do I want all this? I want to travel. I want to do, you know, I want to go places. If I'm just paying to live in my apartment like that I'm never at, like, this isn't the life that I want. And about 8 months into living in Houston, shortly, I would say around the time that I had my spiritual awakening, a lot of things happened. But I got into a car accident doing Uber, which is inevitable. Like, the more you do something, the more you're at risk for something bad to happen. And it was a drunk driver who was going down a one-way, trying to make a U-turn on a one-way, and I inevitably collided with him. But with all of that said, you know, when you get in an accident, this is the first time I was in an accident where I thought to do like an injury claim, because they put me out of work with my car, and you know, I was injured. I didn't think I was injured at the scene. I woke up the next day and was wrong. So I went through that whole process knowing that at some point I was gonna get some money. I didn't know how the whole process works. So I didn't know how much I was gonna get or, you know, any of that. I just knew I was gonna get some money. And around that same time, you know, because it put me out of work, and this was, like I said, early days of Uber, so I wasn't able to like rent a car at that time to be able to continue to do it. So I just did other hustles to supplement, but this gave me the opportunity to be at home a lot. And so I finished my book and published it. And as well with that, I decided that TV was gonna be my boyfriend. Like, I didn't want to meet any new friends. I didn't want to go out and spend money going out or doing anything. I knew I was getting ready to move to Florida and I was gonna be out. So I got really into watching cable because it came along with my internet service. I didn't want cable, but it came along with my internet service. And I started watching HGTV, and all of these shows came to my attention about the tiny house movement. And I was very intrigued by this because I've always watched shows like this, TLC, and you know, all the shows where they're building stuff and flipping people's houses and renovating and all that stuff. I love stuff like that. And I got into watching them build RVs. So there was like shows where like there was two builders that would come in and help somebody that was doing it, you know, and needed some help. And then there was like, you know, people that were doing it themselves. And then I got into watching YouTube videos where people were doing it themselves, or, you know, there was tour videos of people showing people's tiny houses, and I got very intrigued. It wasn't until I discovered Jewel Pearson, who is a black woman who designed and had built her own tiny house, and she's like a pioneer in the game, at least for people of color. And when I saw hers, and she decided to prioritize the way she liked to be, was this bougie diva, and she had a walk-in closet. And at the time I had lots of shoes, lots of clothes, walk-in closet as well. And I was like, there's no way I could do tiny house living, because at that time my mindset wasn't like, let me downsize to get into this. But when I saw she had a walk-in closet in her thing, I was like, I'm sold. If I can bring all my stuff with me, I can go. And that really sparked me, that really inspired me. And so one thing about me, when I know something's coming and I have a goal, especially specifically like money, I will make sure that and I was doing this before I knew about it really, but like manifest that goal and put all my energy and focus and intent and words and thoughts into making that happen. So I knew I was getting money from my injury claim, and I was sold on tiny house living. So I said, when I get this money, I don't know how much it's gonna be, but whatever it's gonna be, that's going toward that new life. I want tiny house life. So I just knew that that was gonna be the goal. So before I left Houston, I sold almost all the stuff that I came with. Most of all the furniture and things like that. I kept basic essentials. So I downsized a lot of my stuff that I had accumulated while I was there, and or things that, you know, I had already had, because I was like, I'm gonna live in a tiny house, I'm not gonna need all this stuff. And then I also started downsizing my expenses. I went through the whole credit card default things. I was living off of credit cards for a little bit. And I said, this is the life that I want. You know, I didn't know when it was gonna happen, and I didn't know how much it was gonna cost me. I just knew that that was gonna be the next phase for me. But, you know, I wasn't ready at that time, you know, obviously. So, cut to, I leave Houston, and I decided to move to Florida. my happy place. My newfound happy place. But when I got to Florida, I moved into a traditional apartment. I had a roommate at first, which allowed me to have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but that didn't last long. I'm not a good roommate, and she wasn't either. But when I say I'm not a good roommate, I'm a good roommate on paper. Quiet, I'm clean, and I pay my bills on time. but like I'm very picky, and I understand that. I'm a lion, I'm a Leo, and I'm very territorial about my stuff. So that's why I say I'm a bad roommate. But yeah, so I had a traditional apartment, and then my second place in Houston, because it took like 2.5, almost 3 years to get this money. But I knew I was gonna get to that point. So again, I was in that mindset. The next place that I looked for when my lease was up was, I was looking for a very small space. I didn't know what that was gonna look like, but I really wanted a small space, and I discovered it living in Florida after doing Uber and stuff and dropping people off, that there's these little alley houses, like little apartment house, like little garage apartment kind of style house basically, but it's on foundation. And I was like, I either want that or a studio apartment. I lived in a studio apartment back in the day, and I was like, I want a studio apartment. I need to practice living tiny again. You know, I want to practice living tiny because this is the life that I want. So I got this cute little renovated shed house, and it was probably like 320 square feet. It was one of my favorite places, and I was the first to live in it. They had just renovated it, and I was the first to live in it, and it was so cute. It was so cute. Like, I love that little apartment. I had my own little driveway. I got to have a little garden in the front. I got to compost, like, because it was my own little house, but it was, you know, stationary. And I was in the backyard of another house where people were renting in the front of me as well. But they had the bigger house, I had the small house, and I just loved it. And that was the first time I actually like talked to my neighbors too. Like, they were super cool. They were LGBT, and it was a great experience. So shortly after I got to Florida, I knew that I needed to go and physically self-actualize myself being in a tiny house space. And I found out about the Florida Tiny House Festival. And I was so stoked to go. I couldn't find anybody to go with me, but I was super stoked to go. When I got there, of course, I was on the tiny house like mission. Like again, I didn't know how much money I was gonna get, but I just knew I felt like I could do a tiny house. Like, based on the YouTube people that were like, oh, I built my own, and you know, I just felt like I could. I get to the tiny house festival and I start going around and touring all the tiny houses. Oh my gosh, they were so beautiful. Oh, so in love. I was like, I can definitely do this. I can definitely do this. And then they had a section where they had like the builders and people who had like materials and things that you would put and make a tiny house. And as I was going through around to them, you know, and picking up their flyers and talking to them and listening to their presentations, like, I was slowly getting a little discouraged. The other thing was, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 black people that were at the festival. You know, I was feeling a little discouraged, but like, I was just excited to be there, like. And then there was the way they set it up, like, they really had the main focal point be the tiny houses. They had a lot of tiny houses in the early days, and then there was a back section that had some alternative stuff. So I walked over there and I saw a row of buses, and I didn't really know too much about that. I had seen some things, but I hadn't really delved down the YouTube journey of anything outside of like tiny houses specifically. And so I had seen a few buses, but I had never really considered that. And then I see a row of RVs, and I was like, nah. So I go over there thinking that maybe they were like vendors or whatever, and it's people who renovated RVs and was living in it. And I was like, what? And I asked these people questions like, how much did you spend to get the RV? And they were like, you know, $3,500. And I was like, excuse me? And they were like, yeah. And then I probably put like $4,000 or $5,000 into renovating it. And I was like, that's seems more realistic and reasonable, and everything's in there. You're just renovating it. You're not building it from scratch. Bob the Builder brain went out of the window, because at that point I thought I was Bob the Builder, okay? That I was gonna build a tiny house from scratch by myself, because I've seen other people do it on TV. And when I saw that, I was like, this is more realistic. This is way more up my lane. This is way more in my scheme of skill, timing, and money that I felt confident about doing. So, you know, I still had the hope and dream of the tiny house thing. You know, I did at one point really want to do a box truck, or to do a tiny house built on a chassis of a truck, because I didn't like the idea of pulling it with a truck. So I was really trying to figure out a way to attach them, and that's an RV, or at least a motorhome RV, where you drive the house and it's not detached. And so when I saw that, I was just like, yep, RV is what I'm gonna get with the money that I got. So when that money came and then it hit and dropped in my account, because you know they hold your money and it takes a minute for them to release it if you ain't got the same money to match what you're getting. I got about 10,000, I think it was like 9 or 10,000. And from my injury claim, after all of that was what I took home. That didn't include the lawyer, what the lawyer took and what the doctors took and all that shit. It probably ended up being like 20,000, because they took a lot. But anyways, what my cut was around 9 or 10,000. I said, bet. At that time, RVs on the market in Florida were running super low, okay, for good quality stuff. And for good quality used things. And again, I had talked to somebody who said they got one for 35. I think I heard somebody got one for 65. And these were in, you know, used and older RVs. So, you know, I did my due diligence. I went back after the Tiny House Festival and I looked into it, and I looked on Craigslist. This was Craigslist era time at the time too. Looked on Craigslist and a few other just sites looking for used RVs, and I saw a bunch of them in the price range where I felt like if I get this and I'll have money to do what I need to do, like register it, get a few new things mechanically if I need to, you know, fix some things up, and, you know, renovate it. And so I bought my first RV. I found it on Craigslist, but it was a Craigslist ad for a consignment dealer, and he had a little dealer location not far from my job. And so I went on my lunch break and went to go look at these RVs, and it was a couple different ones that you could walk through, and I found my first RV, which was a 34-foot Class A Winnebago Adventurer. And man, I did so much demo. I hired a friend of a friend's, I hired a friend's boyfriend to help me out, and which ended up being a waste of money, but I digress. I felt like I needed to pay somebody to confidently help me like renovate and do stuff before I start tearing stuff up. I paid for somebody to help me look for an RV and inspect it and tell me what to look for. So I paid somebody to, you know, give me some guidance basically and help me out with some hands as far as doing things in the renovation. But I tore up the floors, I painted all the walls, I took the wallpaper down, I painted, the walls were green, the cabinets were, no, the walls were purple, the cabinets were green, and the ceiling was blue. And it was called the Colorful Castle. And I redid the floors myself. He helped me tear them up, but I ended up laying them down myself. That was the first time I ever did that. And it was beautiful. Like, it was so nice. It had its issues. Obviously, it was a used RV. It was definitely a huge learning curve going into RV life. First, with electrical. So I had this thing parked in my driveway, which was a challenge in itself because I had to bring it down a very curvy, narrow alley and then back it in to a very, very narrow driveway. But I got that shit in there. People always ask me, like, how do you drive that thing? And I'm like, I was born for this. I don't know. I know how to drive big vehicles, and I know how to park and back them up. And so yeah, I got it, and I was plugging it into the house. I got the adapter thing based, you know, the inspector guy told me what to get, and I got the adapter. We were trying to run the AC up in that thing, and it kept popping the breaker, and I just, you know, there's so many things that go into, I mean, he explained so much, and I even videotaped him, you know, explaining stuff, and I still had to really learn everything on my own. Because there was buttons and stuff that, like, he didn't know for sure. There's always a couple buttons that nobody knows about except for the person that sold it to you. But because I bought it from a consignment versus the actual owner, like, a consignment is somebody, you know, the middleman between the owner and the seller, like, so I didn't get to know all of what went into where all the buttons and stuff like that. I remember early on, the door, the stairs wouldn't go in automatically. I found out later that it's like there's like a little magnet that wasn't like connected somewhere, so it kept like moving out of place, and that's what was messing up the whole stairs and door thing. That was a whole learning curve. But I got more comfortable with RV life as I dived deep into YouTube University, and I learned a lot from people like Robin from Creativity RV. She was like my fairy godmother of RV life. Like, I learned like so much from her, I bought her books, her ebooks that she put out. You know, she's definitely been one of my main mentors in the game. I learned about traveling and travel spots and iOverlander and free camping and all that stuff from like van life nomads, like the Nomadic movement when they were traveling with Trent and Allie, and a few other cute little white couples that were van lifing back in the pandemic time, or pre-pandemic time, going into the pandemic. But yeah, so I learned and I got more comfortable with that, but it was still quite a challenge. The real test of RV life happened when I actually went on my first RV road trip. So this was still when I was working at my corporate job. I took my first paid vacation that I have ever had at any job, really, to be honest. And I was like, I'm gonna go to New Orleans, and I'm gonna go to Mesa Verde National Park, which is in Southwest Colorado, where I'm located now. I'm gonna go to Vegas, and then I'm gonna circle back and hit Atlanta on my way back. Overly ambitious to do an RV trip in that basically doing a cross-country trip in 10 days and coming back and having enough time to enjoy it. No, that is not what happened. And then also just driving long distance, that's when you learn that there's RV driving time and GPS driving time. You gotta add like 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on where you're going. If it's a flat road, no mountains, 30 to 40 minutes extra than the GPS time. If you're going up any mountains, it's gonna be an extra hour. So yeah, I learned all of that like on that trip, and by the time I got to New Orleans, I was like, yeah, I was overly ambitious about doing this. I stayed in New Orleans for 3 days, didn't know how to use or figure out how to use most of all the stuff in that trip, but I still enjoyed myself. The place that the RV park that I was at, it was a small little alley RV park, like not too far from like the French Quarters and stuff like that, and you could pay them a couple $, and they would bring you into town. They had a hot tub and a pool. It was June, so like that was nice. And everybody was pretty friendly, and that's kind of how I broke into RV life. But you know, after that little high and then getting back, and then it was time where I was ready to hit the road, and I had quit my corporate job, and I was getting ready to go work for a friend, driving box trucks around the country. And the way that ended up working out was I put my RV in storage for like 2-3 weeks while I was on the road, and then I would come back to Atlanta, which is where I was based, and take my RV out of storage and go park at an RV park. At that time, I only knew about that. Like, you park RVs at an RV park so you can get your full power, run your AC, especially in the summertime. And that was costing me like $250 to $500. And I was like, I didn't do this life so I could pay rent again. Like, and it wasn't coming together. Like, I couldn't figure out, even with all the YouTube information, like, it still wasn't coming together for me as far as like the lifestyle of like figuring out how to detach and make money on the road, or make money in a different way, which I was doing with the box truck thing, but that didn't allow me to travel in my RV. I was still in one place in Atlanta. I just went between like 2 or 3 RV parks that are even available in that area, and it wasn't the adventurous, glamorous life that I was hoping that I had seen on all the little RV shows or RV channels. So I went through definitely like a down moment in the first RV where I wasn't sure if I was like, why did I get this big RV? I can't take this anywhere. I had a scooter that I never used or took off the back. I was parked in one place. You know, I did have some opportunities. This is when I learned about barter camping or I created a barter camping system for myself in Florida for the winter. And after leaving Florida for the winter and going and visiting my mom in Maryland, you know, and then I parked it and lived at my mom's house, and I just was like questioning the whole thing. I was like, did I make the right choice? Like, why, you know, this is not fun, this is not what I thought. And you know, I didn't know what else to do. I just knew I wanted, you know, I wasn't ready to give up, but the RV that I had just wasn't conventional. It also had a bunch of little issues that I just that I was very unsure about, as far as like the roof, and like the roof was leaking at the first one, and I thought I had sealed it properly and it still leaked a little bit. As far as mechanically, every single RV that I've had has been solid for the most part mechanically, so I haven't had too many mechanical issues, which has been nice. But yeah, the transitions between RVs, I'm now on my 3rd RV, have definitely been difficult. The first RV was so hard to detach from because I spent the most time and money renovating. And it was like, I was set. Like, I thought I had picked the right one for me, and I was just really discouraged, and I just, you know, I was ready to sell it, but it was heartbreaking to sell it. So I had that RV for probably I had it for a little over a year, but I lived in it for less than a year, because I renovated it for a couple months before I moved in. And I sold that one and got my second RV, which is the RV that I lived in for the longest, which was the Purple Palace. Everybody loved the Purple Palace. I love the Purple Palace. The Purple Palace was so hard to give up, but I downsized to that RV because I wanted to go on all the van life adventures that I was seeing with, you know, on YouTube. But I knew I couldn't do a van. Like, I had too much stuff. I didn't want to have storage. I have everything I own with me, and I knew I couldn't do a van. But I was able to get down to a 26-foot Class C Jayco Mini RV, and that was like the perfect size because I was able to back it into one space if I had a clearing behind me, and I could just take up one space. So that allowed me to get into a lot of places, you know, that vans would normally get into, that a big RV could not. and I learned more about RV life and boondocking and overlander spots and free camping and all of that stuff, you know, through my time in the second RV. And then transitioning from the Purple Palace into Rolling Royalty, which is the RV that I'm in now, was definitely a different transition because it was definitely hard to detach, but I knew it was going to somebody, and I got to see it for a little while before, you know, I left it and see its transition. And then also I was ready to upsize again, so it was like the perfect way to like release the Purple Palace and get into what I have now. And none of them have been perfect, and it's definitely been ups and downs, and you know, I've had some of the highest highs, which comes with like the best road trip that I had of my life in 2020 and through 2021, going from Florida to basically to California through, you know, a route back to Florida and then from Florida up to Maine and back down to Florida. And that was an amazing road trip. But I lost my dog, my first dog, or not my very first dog, but I lost my dog Prince on that trip. I was staying with some people, and he escaped out of the backyard and later got hit by a car. And it was devastating for me, but I kept going on the road trip, and I knew he wanted that for me. I knew he in some way sacrificed himself so that I could enjoy the trip. But yeah, that was definitely. And then, you know, with the highs and lows of the pandemic, the panini, with the highs and lows of the panini and the money that came with that, you know, I definitely had times, and still, you know, to this day I have times where, you know, I feel like RV life is choosing me, in the sense of like I feel homeless, or I feel like I can't do what I want to do, in a sense. Like I wouldn't trade this life, but I can't do what I want to do, which has the same feeling of being stuck when I was living apartment life. Like I couldn't do what I wanted to do because I was just paying bills. Like in RV life, sometimes I'm just surviving, you know, and that sometimes feels like I'm stuck in RV life. But I love it. I love it, and it has provided so much freedom in my life. When people ask me why, what is the frequently asked question? Why did you decide to do RV life? And it was for freedom. Like I was not living, and I wanted to travel, and I wanted to live life and explore and be adventurous, and I couldn't do that, you know, living to pay bills, working to pay bills, and working to maintain a lifestyle that I didn't enjoy. So, you know, I've discovered how much nomadic lifestyle was made for me. I am a nomad. Like I am not somebody who needs to have a stable foundation in order to feel home. My home is wherever I park it, because I can bring all my stuff with me, like a little hermit crab. And I can park it in front of the beach, and I can park it in front of my friend's house, or I can park it in the middle of nowhere. And I love that about this life. I discovered so much self-empowerment, you know, traveling solo and being nomadic solo, or living in an RV full-time solo and traveling, because, you know, there's a lot that goes into that you have to that you discover and have to be aware of, for your safety, for your enjoyment, your happiness. And you know, I discovered a lot of that on this journey. Along the journey, as you know, why I'm here, I started to document this on my YouTube channel. My RV life has definitely inspired other people's RV life journey. Some people have started RV life from my watching my channel and have been inspired by my journey the way that I was inspired by other people's journey. That led to people seeking expert knowledge from me and so I decided to incorporate that in my business and help people out the same way people helped me out, whether I got free information on YouTube or I paid for expert information. I got help to do this life, and some people, you know, are able to dive in and figure it out on their own, and some people need a little bit of guidance. Or I have a business that I added the RV life consulting, which includes helping you find an RV that's used and do the whole negotiating process, to also renovation expertise, knowledge on what to change, not to change, and stuff like that. And then also if you want some information just about the lifestyle, you know, I've learned a lot about free camping and, you know, where to park, where not to park, adventures, hotspots, all different kind of things, the technicalities when it comes to, like, you know, insurance and registration and stuff like that. I've learned a lot, and I have a lot of information that I can pass on. So if you're interested in that, Crown Consulting is that business, and it is on my website, QueenTasha'sEmpire.com. If you want more information about that, I'll put the link in the description. What I have really learned about RV life is that I am a true nomad, and that I want to continue this journey. But I do now have the experience of two lifestyles, which is the conventional lifestyle and now a RV nomadic lifestyle. But I also crave an alternative lifestyle of homesteading. So eventually I do want to have an international home base where I can have earthship and, you know, a bunker and a food forest and a community garden and all of that stuff. But I will always be nomadic. I will always be nomadic. I love the freedom of this lifestyle, and it feels aligned with who I am in my soul. And I've been doing RV life for 6+ years now, and the goal next for my nomadic lifestyle is to try out something very foreign to me. Well, only semi-foreign. I've lived on a boat before, and I've driven a boat, but not sailed a boat. But I want to live on a sailboat or do a houseboat, because a houseboat can be on land that has a lake or small water, a pond of such, and you get that rocking flow without having to learn how to, like, move and sail it. Sailing is a whole different, like, learning curve as far as working with the wind to get your boat to go where you want it to go without capsizing. So before I do that life, I still have some learning to do, but that's the eventual life, is to be on the water and live in a boat. I do want to have an alternative lifestyle that is foundation based at some point, but I've learned so much about breaking free from the matrix and what true freedom is through this lifestyle, and I encourage anybody to at least try it once, whether it's for a goal to save up to get a house, whether it's just to go on a grand adventure while you're young or while you're old. When you're old, I encourage anybody to do this lifestyle, because it definitely teaches you about your own power to create your own freedom. Well, that's my story. Thank you, Royals, for joining me on this journey in story time of how I found freedom through RV life. If you didn't know that story, then I satisfied your curiosity in knowing how I even got into this whole lifestyle. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and comment below. Until next time, live fearlessly free and reign supreme. Peace and blessings. I'm out.